Hello, greetings to everyone. My name is Primoz Kocbek. I'm a senior research assistant from University of Maribor, Faculty of Health Sciences. My background is in biostatistics, big data analysis, and lately large language models with applications in healthcare. My presentation is interdisciplinary, exploring the potential of AI models' capabilities, more precisely vision large language models, in producing insights from published glycan biomarker research. This is a joint work with collaborators from Genos and GlycanAge, especially Azra and Dora, as well as Lucia and Gregor from my home institution. This work is still in the early stages. So we asked the question if current state-of-the-art AI models, basically LMMs, can retrieve relevant information from glycan research papers. That can include very diversely formatted PDFs with large, sometimes rotated tables, for example, from supplements, as well as complex figures. Can we leverage LMMs to generate insights that might not be easily found by, for example, search of PDFs or online databases? For example, if a researcher gets an interesting blood result test, can context-aware LMMs help him? What are context-aware LMMs? Basically, they just mean that we ingest external similar knowledge together with our query, and send it to the model. This is known as retrieval augmented generation, or RAGs. More of them in a few slides. So firstly, we need to define how we can evaluate such a task. We required some ground truths, basically a benchmark set. In our case, we decided on 100 multiple choice question, MCQs, with including difficulty level from easy, medium, and hard to evaluate the model's answers. The questions answered were prepared by domain experts and consisted of 18 papers of IgG glycosylation in different diseases. Compared with different frameworks and the benchmark set was also refined as needed. So now let's look at the benchmark set. The difficulty level was designed with regard of the difficulty retrieving the information from the paper, where easy should perform well if you give the model just the text content, or basically text-only RAG. The medium difficulty should perform well if we give our model formatted tables and figure context or multi-model RAG, whereas the hard question, at least some of them, could be considered for future research, especially if the context can be found in other papers from the references, for example. So now that we have the benchmark set, the first question is it any good? Does it perform as expected? We therefore checked with models without context. How much do they already know in general? Are they just guessing? Since the research papers were published and we have access, we use two of the most common models that are currently used in reference in a lot of studies: OpenAI GPT-4o and GPT-4o Mini via API. As you can see from the prompt template, the variables included were question, constraints on possible answers, A, B, C, D, as well as the potential answers. There were also some particulars to get the desired results, so don't include any explanation, and instruction to first exclude unlikely answer, then select from the rest. This means a model purely guessing would likely be correct in 25 to 33% on average, since we assume no more than one answer can be excluded. The results of the GPT-4o Mini for hard questions came in the lower end of our estimate, so it seems that our benchmark set was doing okay. So now we talk about the logic behind context-aware LMMs. We just mean that we ingest external relevant knowledge together with our question and send it to the big model. A simple RAG framework, for example, for PDFs would just mean that we save the PDF as text, then split it up, and store it in a database for retrieval. Especially the process for simple recs is divided into two parts. First is getting external knowledge in a usable format or data indexing, which means data loading, splitting, embedding, and storing. And secondly, data retrieval and generation which retrieves the highest case-similar chunks of text and submits them together with the question to the LMMs, getting some generated response. But such a simple framework could lose information about particular PDF elements, such as rotated tables, for example, two-column text. For this, the solutions are basically multimodal recs, which use basically vision LMMs. So here are some examples of the information that we want to capture: diverse tables with graphic elements, rotated tables, figures with caption on the left, for example. Just extracting text with rotated tables usually gives us only non-connected information. So for this, multimodal rec can be used. Our approach basically consists of using a visual language model, then can process images, basically create summaries for them, define the border of the tables, and process them like rotation. The main downside of this is that it needs additional computational resources, basically a GPU or graphic card, which can process data in parallel effectively. How do we integrate all this into our framework? Basically, we use summaries of tables, images, and let the vision model process the information, since it is still a language model. Basically, the green tinted part highlights our approach. We get the most relevant tables, images by using the similarity of the summaries. Then we provide the raw images and tables as context in the LMM. So here's a more technical image. We can see that we segment the PDF's images, tables, text, and process it using summaries as having additional document store for raw images, strings, text, tables. The key part is basically using an LMM multiple times. So how did our framework perform on the benchmark set? We tested it on the OpenAI native text only. Basically, we use AI Assistant where we uploaded the 18 research papers and stored it in their native vector database. Then we tested it on our multimodal framework. So as a disclaimer, we used GDPR compliant OpenAI models, which can be done by signing some special addendum. The results were in line with expectation, especially the medium difficulty question, where the information is contained in the tables and figures. Our multimodal framework answered 90% of the questions correctly when using GPT-4o. On the other hand, the smaller GPT-4o mini model results were a bit disappointing, since the model with native text-only context performed better. So our next step was also to look at the question by domain expert if there are some anomalies. Note that the question and the benchmark set were designed considering retrieving the information from the paper. Here are some examples for some anomalies. For example, one expects that easy questions would be answered correctly by most models, whereas hard questions would be answered correctly less often. So here's basically an example which was answered by all models correctly, also without context. Since we're using an LMM chatbot, we can, of course, just ask it to explain the reasoning. So we asked ChatGPT for our mini, the least powerful model, to explain the selection of the question. So here we are looking for a negative, and it got selected because it's generally not relevant for glycan analysis. This can be thought as general domain knowledge, so we changed the difficulty to easy. This is, of course, an example why it is important to do a qualitative examination of the benchmark. Similar cases were absorbed in other benchmarks in other fields as well, where having a lot of easy ground truth could inflate the success rate of a model. So we also performed some preliminary tests on small open source vision language models that could be useful once proprietary information is involved. Once the framework is set, we can basically just switch out different vision language models. However, the results seem not to be competitive or not much better than random, with an average of 34% correct answers. Note that some minor modifications were also needed on the prompt template, since the no context model a lot of the time returned an answer that it did not have the required information. So how could this look in practice? Here's an example. You ask a question, you get an answer, and also you get the used context information. So here is basically the information. I can just send the message. It takes a few seconds, and I got the answer. Here the first context is from the paper 2, which is also in our benchmark indicated. Here we can also select different models and also the parameters, like temperature, where 0 basically means it should be as factual as possible. We can change maximum tokens. We can also change that we want only 2, for example, just to get information from 2 contexts. Here is number 1, and here's number 2. Here we can see what basically the model gets, what the augmented model gets, basically. We can also submit more files and basically broaden our database. So basically, this was it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a very nice presentation. So Gordon tells us almost the opposite of George Orwell at some point, right? So it's telling us we are all different, but there are some of us more different than others. So how important is the ethnic group in finding your model?
Excuse me, what?
How important is the ethnic group? Did you take into consideration?
No, not really. So
the data he has is just from Croatian islands, so it's
okay.
It's very
just
homogeneous in that respect, but it's very important. We know that the density is a very strong factor.
And then my other question is, so, or better saying, the question is how unhealthy you become, right? It's not so much how healthy you are, how unhealthy you become. So what is the baseline? What is the ideal baseline in this model? Is when you were younger or 10 years ago? So this is some sort.
yeah, I mean, this is a bit out of the context. I mean, this is just the early stages. Afterwards,
Maybe
yeah.
I can jump in,
Yeah, okay.
because it's our data. So what we define as a baseline is an average person in that region. So are you just average or are you worse?
Exactly, but this is where
So I agree, that's not healthy. But that's what we're taking as a median starting point. Yeah. So you can be better, you can go below 0. It's not healthy and then going to disease. It's either you're a median or you are worse or better.
So exactly, so you become unhealthy with the age, right? So that's the point. So how unhealthy you become, it's what we want to determine, right?
Ultimately you die. So that's the ultimate.
At some point you will die.
Yeah. Sorry for the
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we move on. Thank you.
Yeah.